Hi there, Jess here. Happy Halloween! This year, I'm going to do the same thing I do every year, Pinky. I'm going to put on my old high school choir dress, and I'm going to either be a vampire or a witch, depending on if I want to deal with the hassle of putting in my fangs. I don't today, so I'm just going to be a witch today. Tell me what you're going to be in the comments below. So, this is the end of the month, and so I thought I would talk about the books that I read this month. And in my newbie book tag video, I mentioned that I have a goal to read an average of 10 books a month till the end of the year, and this month I read 22. So I blew my goal out of the water, and let's just hurry and dive in because this video is going to be huge as it is. So I read from the library the Jacoby series, which is really fun. I solved the mystery in this one within the first probably 50 pages, but I wasn't bored anyway, and I just kept reading, and it was really a fun story, and his sense of humor was wickedly dark, and it made me laugh in all the right places. So the series has been really a fun one, and I'm excited to see which book he comes out with next. He probably is going to need two to finish up the series. I also really enjoyed the Wrath and the Dawn and the Rose and the Dagger, which is a retelling of the Scheherazade story. And this was really, really well written. I really enjoyed it. I loved the characters. I loved the storytelling. And I ordered these, and actually one of them shipped today from Book Depository, so I'll be getting that soon, and I'm very excited. I also read My Lady Jane. This was hilarious. I loved it so much, and I have always kind of had a fascination with the Tudor family. I don't know why, but I have always found it really fascinating. And so this was a really fun, irreverent take on Lady Jane Grey, and it all doesn't end as tragically as real history does. So I sort of wish that history was more like this than the real one, but this one, instead of having Catholics and Protestants, they have shapeshifters called Edwins, and Verities are people who hate magic and shapeshifting, and so they are kind of at odds, and they butt heads a lot, and it's just really, really a fun story. So check that one out. I read this month A Court of Thorns and Roses and A Court of Mist and Fury, and these were phenomenal. This story has a mix of some of the elements of Beauty and the Beast, and also some from Hades and Persephone and Tamlin. I mean, one of the main characters' name is Tamlin, so right from the get-go, that's in there. And those are some of my favorite stories ever. Tamlin is one of my favorite ballads, and I even, covered it in college, and that was just really a fun thing to do. This sequel, A Court of Mist and Fury, I liked even better than the first one. And this one, I can't even tell you the story because I don't want to spoil it for anybody. But I loved the characterizations. I loved the relationships between all the different characters. And there's a scene in this book where the main character, Feyre, goes to the Weaver's cottage to retrieve something. And the Weaver is singing a song that is described as really, really horrifying and dark and just awful, awful. And it's also another one of my favorite ballads, which is the Twa Sisters, which there's a song called The Cruel Sister by Old Blind Dogs. Check it out. I love that ballad. Really dark, really probably not very pleasant. It probably says way too much about me and my personality, but it's awesome. Then, those were all the ones I really, really, really enjoyed. Let's get into, so these are the ones that I own. So I joined a couple months ago the Book of the Month Club, and I'm going to actually stop because I'm not really enjoying the books as much as I hoped I would. But this was the one that I got in, I think, August. Yep, August. And this was The Woman in Cabin 10. For some reason, I just didn't quite connect with the story as well as I thought I would. And so the mystery, it was interesting, but it just didn't grip me as much as I had hoped it would. So if you're interested in mysteries, maybe give that one a try. Then, the next month in September, there was The Couple Next Door. And this one is another mystery. And I think as a mom, this one really hit too close to home. and so I couldn't love it as much as maybe I would have 5 or 6 years ago. But this one made me have little mini panic attacks all the time through it. And this one is The Wonder. This is by the same author who wrote Room, which I have not read, I'll be honest. And this one was interesting. This one took place in the 19th century, which is my wheelhouse. When I say in my last video that I love classics, I usually specifically love the 19th century British literature, like Austen, Bronte, Dickens. I like some French literature like Dumas, and I like some of the Russian from Tolstoy. And so I really love that time period. And this one was this is when this took place in Ireland. And this is about a girl who claims that she has lived for 4 months with no food. And so the nurse, who was trained by Florence Nightingale, goes and tries to discover if that's really true or if it's a hoax, and find out her findings. I was trying to guess what the problem was the whole time, and I was wrong. So that one's pretty interesting. Oh, I've got these over here too. So this is Nightmares, which is a middle school level book. I bought this at my daughter's school book fair a couple months ago, and I said, hey, this would be a fun one for October. It would be a quick read, and it was pretty fun. There are a couple more in the series, so I'll probably have to check those out a couple months from now. My classic for the month was The Divine Comedy, and I count this as 3 books because it has The Inferno, Purgatorio, and Paradiso. And I've read Inferno several times. I tried reading this book in college, and I got all the way up through, like halfway through Paradise, and then I had my final, and then we had to go and do a different book immediately after, so I wasn't able to quite finish it. So my goal this month was to read from the beginning to the end and actually say that I had read the entirety of The Divine Comedy in one sitting. And I've read Inferno like probably 3 or 4 times, and I'll be honest, it's the most interesting. I do think that the punishments are really, really clever and fit the crime. And then you get to Purgatory, and it gets really, really dull, and there's lots of chanting. And I've read through Purgatory one other time. I made it through again, and then I read Paradise, and it just keeps going. And there really isn't a conclusion, and I probably will never read this again, except I said that to my husband, and then I said, actually, I'll probably have to read the Longfellow translation, just so I can see a master translate another master's work, but I'm not really excited about it, and it'll probably be another 5-10 years before I get around to doing that again. So, Divine Comedy. Then, these are 2 that I finished. I started in previous months, but I finished them this month. So this is Voyager. This is book 3 in the Outlander series. I'm not going to talk about this very much in this one because it will take way too long. I have very strong opinions about this series. So this will have to wait for a video all its own. This is The Child Whisperer, which is a nonfiction book. It's kind of a parenting guide, and she talks about how children come in 4 different types and what their energy levels are and how to kind of get to know them based on who they are. And it was interesting. I could definitely see some basis for what she's talking about in my own life and in the lives of my children. There are some other claims she makes that I'm a little more skeptical about. Like, she claims that she can identify who people are just based on their facial characteristics, and that one kind of makes me question a little bit whether or not that's really factual, but some of this was very, very interesting to read and definitely makes me want to try to work on some of this with my own kids. Now we're going to get into some of the library books that I didn't enjoy quite as much this month. So this was The Huntress of Thornback Forest. I knew picking this up that this was going to be kind of a light fantasy read. It has elements of The Swan Princess and Robin Hood, and it was fine. I didn't dislike it. It was a fun story. It just was a little predictable in the plot, and I could kind of see everything happening and coming together exactly the way I had kind of thought it was going to. And so it wasn't as gripping a read. And everyone was too perfect. You know, I needed, the main characters needed to have a little more darkness in them, I guess. Which, again, probably says way more about me than about the book, but that's how I felt about this one. It was fun. Give it a try. This is Story's End, the sequel to Storybound. I read this a couple months ago. So the library finally found the copy that they had lost and put this on my hold shelf this past month. So I finished it. This one is also a middle school level story. Not terribly involved. It's an interesting story. It's a story about stories, which is always kind of fun and clever. The pacing was a little off for me. Towards the end, I mean, you're still building up bad guys up until the last like 30 pages, and then everything gets resolved really, really simply and without explaining some of the stuff, why it gets solved, and who the characters are, and where they came from, and why, and all that jazz. So we build up a lot, and then the climax happens, and there's really no denouement. It just kind of ends. So, wasn't my favorite. I read Cruel Beauty and Crimson Bound. I did actually enjoy Cruel Beauty. This one, like A Court of Thorns and Roses, also has elements of Beauty and the Beast and Tam Lin in it, which I thought was interesting that there were two within a single month that I picked up that just happened to have similar elements, but that was a fun coincidence, and I enjoyed it. This one I thought was pretty fun. It was darker than most other Beauty and the Beast retellings are, that I've come across anyway, but I kind of enjoyed it. Crimson Bound was not as good, I thought. This one is supposed to have elements from Little Red Riding Hood, probably a couple other ones in here too. It just, I don't know, I didn't get this one as much. I didn't feel it. It seemed both too predictable and too out there at the same time, which I know is a contradiction, but that's really how it was for me. I couldn't connect any of the characters. I didn't like any of the characters. And it's hard to get into a story if you don't tolerate anybody in it. So that was probably it for me. I just didn't like the characters, and so then the pacing, I was like, let's get this over with. I don't care about any of you. I want you all to die off so that the story will end and I can read something else. But I finally read it, it ended, and bleh. And then Nellie Dean. This is a retelling, you see, A Return to Withering Heights. Full disclosure, Jane Eyre is my favorite classic of all time. I love it. I have read it I don't know how many different times, and at each phase of my life it speaks to me on a different level, and I love it absolutely. I love the movies. I have taught my children the story. I have a video of my daughter, my oldest daughter, from 2 years ago when she was 3. I have a video of her telling the story of Jane Eyre, and I'll probably post that on this channel at some point. But I love Jane Eyre, and so people kind of automatically assume that if you like Jane Eyre by Charlotte Bronte, you're going to like Wuthering Heights by her sister. I don't. I hate Wuthering Heights. I hate it. It's not, to me, it's not a love story. It's a hate story. And it's about people who are despicable, awful human beings, and I wish they would all die off. And fortunately, most of them do. And I hate it. I hate it. I hate it. But I saw this at the library and it snagged my eye. I was like, okay, well, it's a retelling of something. It's from a different character's point of view. I feel like I have to read it. So I checked it out, and it sat here on my table for probably a month and a half, just waiting for me to finally pick it up. So I finally did, and I just said, you know what, it's coming due. Let me just suck it up and read it. And I did, and I read it within a few hours, and I am not a fan of the story all around. I just, apparently, everything that is associated with Wuthering Heights, I absolutely despise. I did not like this story. It was interesting. It was told from the point of view of Nellie Dean, who is the maid, not really the maid, she's the housekeeper, and she is kind of the narrator for the whole story in the original book. So we get to hear her narrate again, and this one tells about her side of the story. And if I thought, you know, I don't like Kathy and Heathcliff, and I really don't like Hindley, and this is about how she and Hindley have a thing going on, and it just did not enjoy this book. But if you're into Wuthering Heights and you just absolutely love it, you think it's the most passionate epic ever written, you'll probably really enjoy this book. So those are the books that I read this month. Happy October. Again, let me know if you read any of these books. If you liked them, if you didn't, tell me your opinions. We can have a nice friendly debate in the comment section. Let me know what you're going to be dressed up as for Halloween. And I'll probably be coming back in the next day or two with a list of books that I'm planning on reading in November. But until then, thank you for stopping by Little Literati. I'm Jess, and we'll see you later.